Hello everyone, and today I'm going to be showing you how to mask UI sprites in Unity using shader graph. And as you can see here, we're going to be applying some effects to it as well. So essentially you'll get what you see here, not exactly the same because I'll be using an example project, but we can highlight playable areas and kind of darken out unplayable areas. And we can add some color differences and some subtle effects on the playable areas. Okay, so here's our example project, and let me show you what I have set up. So here's our map. We have some different objects and some boundaries, playable areas and unplayable areas. And I've went and set up a canvas. This is simply black screen so far. I also have a map camera, which sits pretty high up, and it essentially renders a top-down view of the map. And we're going to be basically taking a picture of this and then using that picture to apply some effects to. So it won't be a real-time map per se, but it'll still work. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you how to create an image of this top-down map. So right now we have this map camera, and it's just rendering right now. And what we want to do is actually create a render texture. So if we go and create render texture, and we'll just call this RT, I don't know, map render texture. So now we go ahead and set the size of this. Let's do something kind of small, like 1024. And if we go back to the map camera, here is target texture. We can set this render texture. So now that camera is no longer rendering. It's rendering to this texture, as you can see here. So now we're going to be using this texture. We basically need to get this texture and make it a PNG image. So I've gone ahead and created this custom tool, which you can find the code for in the description, and it basically takes a render texture. So we can just plug this render texture in there and export to PNG, and we'll just go ahead and save this in our assets, I suppose. We'll just call this sprite map render. Okay, so now that you have the image, we need a way to mask this off. And how you mask an image, or create a mask for an image, we basically need to take this. I'm just going to open it up in GIMP, which is kind of like Photoshop. So now we have our map image in GIMP, and I'm going to create a new layer, call this mask, and we will fill it with the foreground color, which is black. We'll go ahead and put this under our map image. Take our map image, bring the opacity down a little bit, just so we kind of see where we're going here. And on the mask layer, let's go ahead and take our path tool, or whatever kind of tool you want to use to create a selection, and we'll go ahead and just kind of, I'll actually keep this simple and just make it something like that. Okay, we'll do selection from path. Now in here, we want to fill this selection with white. And make sure you're on the mask layer when you do that. Now we can select none, hide this. That's our mask image right there. So now let's export this as PNG. We'll call this mask render map. Export it back into the project files. So now back in the project, we have our mask and we have our sprite map. And with both of these, we'll want to, well actually with just the sprite map, we'll want to make this sprite 2D and UI, so that we can put that on our canvas. So now that we have our map mask and the actual image of the map, let's go ahead and create the shader. So I'm going to create, by the way, I'm using Unity 6 HDRP, so it might be a little different if you're using URP or the base render pipeline. But I'm going to use shader graph, HDRP, and then I'm going to do a canvas shader graph. And this is a shader graph that works pretty good on canvases. I'll just call this sprite mask shader. Open this up. And as you can see, this shader has a lot less kind of nodes and options you can use. It's pretty limited, but it's still a shader graph at the end of the day and does some pretty powerful stuff. So let's go ahead and create some properties in this shader graph. And the first thing we're going to need is the base texture. So we'll call this base texture. And I'm actually going to assign this that texture that we made for the map. Now I'll create another texture 2D and call this mask texture. And I'll go ahead and assign that mask texture. And we're going to need a couple properties for the effects. So I'm going to use brightness to control the effects of the playable area and the non-playable area. So we'll have inside brightness, which will be the playable area. And then we'll create another called outside brightness. And for inside brightness, I'm going to use 1.3 as the default value, and outside we'll just use 0.3 as the default. Let's go ahead and create another property. This one will be a color, and we'll call this mask tint. So what color you want that mask to be. And for default, let's just do like red color. Okay, and then let's get some properties for this mask itself. We'll create a float called tint strength, so how strong that color is. And default, we'll use 0.25. So let's go ahead and get started on this. And the first thing we're going to want to do is sample both of our textures. What we'll do is we're going to multiply our base map by our inside and outside brightness. So let's go ahead and create two multiply nodes. And let's plug inside brightness and outside brightness into each of those. So we'll do inside brightness, outside brightness, multiply both of those. So we should get different images here in both of these. As you can see, our outside brightness is a lot darker than inside brightness. Now with our mask, let's go ahead and saturate this. And this essentially keeps the value between 0 and 1. Now let's get a lerp node. And we're going to lerp between our brightnesses and our saturated mask for the T value. So now you can see our mask starting to take shape there on the screen. Let's go ahead and take our mask and we're going to multiply it by our mask tint. Now you can see our mask turns red because that's the default color I chose. Let's make some space here. Let's go ahead and multiply our mask with our strength here. And let's take this into a saturate, or wrong node. Saturation node. And we'll go ahead and just desaturate this a little bit to make it more black and white. This is totally optional. You don't have to use that. Let's add these two together. As you can see, our mask is starting to take shape here. And basically, just plop that into our base color. We can save this. Go to our canvas. Let's go ahead and create this map image, and we're going to use a raw image for this one. Let's call this map. And we'll resize this to be the same size as our render texture, which was 1024 by 1024. You don't need a texture on it. If you do want one, you can just use the UI sprite mask. But we really probably don't need to. Let's create a material from this shader. I just called mine MUI shader mask. Shader graphs. And where is it here? Sprite mask shader. As you can see, we already have some values equipped in. We can go back to our map image and assign this material to our material slot. Now you can see the mask appears in the game view. And we can adjust this, our outside brightness. You can make it stronger if you wanted. Inside brightness, these might actually be flipped. There we go. Yep, we just accidentally flipped those two values, but it's alright. Now you can see we've kind of grayed out the unplayable area and highlighted the playable area. And we can change that tint to whatever we want. We can make it bluish tint if we wanted. So that's how you can create that and kind of mask off images with shader graph. And if you wanted to apply some different effects to this mask, like say for example, let's take a noise node. Just do simple noise, I guess. And we'll go ahead and multiply the mask with the noise. And as you can see now, our mask gets noisy. And if we just plug this back in to B instead of the sample noise, now we get some noisy texture on that play area. Now that's probably not what you want. You can have some different effects, maybe like scan lines or something. But yeah, that's how you can use shader graph to mask off images in the UI in Unity. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.